Hey everybody, it's time for Chapter 3 of our new book, Socks. Chapter 3, Socks and the Formula. The arrival of Charles William upset the order of Socks' life. Meals were no longer served on time. Laps were always occupied. Lights were turned on in the night. The washing machine swished and the dryer hummed at odd hours. The house was filled with lint from diapers, which tickled his nose. The Brickers' friends who once had admired Socks now came to admire the baby. Tiffy, the little girl next door who loved babies and who also liked to pick up cats, usually around the middle, came to watch Charles William's bath almost every morning. Socks spent a lot of time sneezing among the fluffs of dust under the bed and in the front bedroom, where Tiffy could not get at him. The one comfort in Socks's life was leftover formula, sometimes a few drops and sometimes an ounce or two, which was poured into his bowl after the baby was fed. Socks began to wait for the sound of Charles Williams smacking at his bottle. That baby! His cries grew louder and his snacks greedier. His neck became strong enough to support his head. His eyes stopped crossing. He made the excitement discovery that his hands belonged to him, and he waved them happily. He kicked his feet and said, "Ugh, ugh, ugh, ugh." "He's a big boy, yes he is," said Mrs. Bricker in the voice that used to belong to her cat. Socks, on the other hand, grew lazy. Instead of chasing his ping-pong ball across the living room, down the hill, and into the bedroom where Mr. Bricker would have to reach for it, he now patted it with a curved paw and let it roll off by itself. When the mailman brought Charles William another present, Socks examined the wrapping paper, but he no longer bothered to hide it or play with it or the ribbon. One Sunday afternoon, Socks, comfortably full of warm formula, was dozing in a patch of sunshine on the living room carpet when another set of visitors arrived to see the baby. They were Charles William's Uncle Walter, Aunt Cassie, and 8-year-old cousin Mike. He was carrying a package wrapped in paper printed with blue rabbits. Socks remembered these people. Aunt Cassie's lap was narrow and hard. Uncle Walter enjoyed rumpling the cat's fur so that the cat had to lick and lick and lick to get himself back in order. Mike teased. This afternoon, however, Socks felt too comfortable and too drowsy to flee away. The first thing Uncle Walter did upon entering the house was to take off his hat, which he wore to cover his bald head, and shy it across the room so that it landed on Socks. "Hi, Socks, old boy," said Uncle Walter. Then he added to Mr. Bricker, his brother-in-law, "I see you're still keeping that cat." Socks glared from under the brim of the hat, but he did not budge. Mrs. Bricker proudly carried Charles William into the living room to show him to her brother's family. She had dressed him in one of the many little knit suits that the mailman had brought, and his rosy feet were bare. Charles William took one look at Uncle Walter and screamed. Socks came out from under the hat with a start and retreated under a chair. He recognized fear when he heard it and accepted the scream as a warning of danger. If Charles William was in danger, so was he. Maybe Charles William was of some use after all. Here is a picture of Socks hiding under the hat. A cat under the hat. Until he heard the baby scream and he ran away. Mrs. Bricker also recognized a cry of fear. She sat down on the couch and held Charles William really close. "Did something frighten the baby?" she asked tenderly. "It's all right. Nothing's going to hurt the baby." Charles William hid his face in his mother's neck and just sobbed. "Maybe a pin is sticking him," suggested Uncle Walter. Charles William, braver than his mother, held him close, stole a look at the visitors, shrieked again, and shivering with sobs, hid his face with his mother. Socks peered out from under the chair. Everyone was seated, and although the Brickers were concerned, no one was really frightened. "Oh, it's just Walter's bald head," said Aunt Cassie matter-of-factly. "All babies are frightened the first time they see a bald head." "What am I supposed to do?" asked Uncle Walter. "Take off my head and carry it under my arm?" Aunt Cassie, not a woman for baby talk, took hold of Charles William's hand. "Charles William, you are a fine, healthy boy," she said, and turned it over to her son. "Mike, say hello to your new cousin." "Hi, Chucky," said Mike, who plainly thought babies were boring. Visiting relatives was boring too, and a waste of a good afternoon. He set the package on the couch as if he were glad to be rid of it and flopped back into a chair. Charles William took his face out of his mother's neck, looked at Uncle Walter, and howled again. "For goodness sake, Walter, put on your hat," said Aunt Cassie. "Nobody cares if you wear it in the house, and you can't expect the baby to understand the whole world all at once." Uncle Walter picked up his hat from the carpet and did as he was told. Charles William's sobs ceased. With the danger, whatever it was out of the way, Socks turned a wary eye on Mike, who was slumped in a chair staring at the ceiling. The boy looked harmless enough, but Socks did not trust him for a minute. As he watched, his ears picked up the faint, threatening wail of another cat, the sort of wail that leads to fighting with fangs and claws. The wail grew louder. Where could that cat be? Socks looked anxiously around the room, half expecting to see the old black cat that sometimes prowled across the backyard. That sound was all the more frightening because Socks could not find the creature who was making it. Oh my goodness, look. Here's Socks hiding under the chair, and Mike all slumped down in the chair. Mike, stop that noise, said Aunt Cassie. You'll frighten Charles William, and stop slouching. The cat wail stopped, but Socks continued to keep an eye out for the enemy. He also watched Mike, who remained slumped in the chair, bored with the opening of the gift, bored with all the exclamations over the brown corduroy bear that his mother had bought at a church bazaar. The small bear caught Socks's attention, and he did not find it boring at all. The bear was going to make a good sparring partner, and Socks could not wait to get at it. All babies love soft bears, and I knew you had enough clothes by now, said Aunt Cassie, who was holding Charles William on her lap. Have you started him on egg yolk yet? Socks looked longingly at the bear, which Miss Bricker was holding on her lap as if she needed something to take the place of Charles William. Say, Bill, said Uncle Walter to Mr. Bricker, have you thought about buying the kid an encyclopedia? Now's a good time. The price goes up after first of the year. Mr. Bricker tried to swallow a yawn. He had given Charles William his bottle at 2 o'clock in the morning, and getting the air bubble out of him had taken a lot longer than usual. Mike was bored with egg yolk discussion. He was bored with his father, sitting there under his hat, trying to sell a set of encyclopedias. He stared thoughtfully at Socks, who was still watching the bear from under the chair. Then, looking innocently in another direction, Mike parted his lips and began to pant in short, quick pants like a dog. The pupils of Socks' green, golden eyes grew large and black. A dog in the house? Where? The enemy cat returned with a threatening wail. The dog panted. Socks was terrified. He was surrounded by invisible enemies. Wild-eyed, he darted out from under the chair to the center of the rug. Panting harder, the invisible dog seemed to be getting closer. Say, hasn't that cat put on a lot of weight? Asked Uncle Walter, who had been forced to admit that Charles William would not be ready to read for a few years, and by then the encyclopedia conversation was over, and then he thought the encyclopedias might be out of date by then. You know, said Aunt Cassie, who was letting Charles William clutch her finger, overweight animals are subject to heart trouble, the same as overweight people. Her voice then shifted to a higher tone. Does the baby see the kitty? Look at the fat kitty. You're right, he is gaining weight. Mrs. Bricker sounded surprised, as if she had not taken the time to look at her cat lately. Charles William, turning his head in the direction of the cat fight sound, looked worried. Socks decided to risk the run to the safety of the bedroom, but Uncle Walter reached out and caught him as he tried to go by. Socks struggled. Uncle Walter would not let him go. Mike, I told you to stop that noise, said Aunt Cassie, and continued with her discussion of Socks's weight problem. That cat should be put on a diet before it's too late. Our poor old lassie is much healthier now that we have him on a salt-free, low-cholesterol diet. The dog gets chicken breasts, we get hamburgers, said Uncle Walter, amusing himself by rumpling the cat's fur. I buy chicken breasts on sale and freeze them. Aunt Cassie had an answer for everything. Socks endured the rumbling the best he could, but the minute the big hands released him as he crouched close to the floor and glared in pure hatred at Uncle Walter, then, looking anxiously from right to left and back again, he fled from the living room from his hideaway under the bed. There he remained among the dust fluffs, sneezing occasionally and trying to put his fur in order in a space so low that he could not sit up. Everything was wrong. He hated Uncle Walter and distrusted Mike. Aunt Cassie did not admire him. Worn out by the events of the afternoon, and with his fur in disarray, Socks fell asleep. Things were sure to be better at supper time. Even though Socks slept, his radar ears told him what was going on. The visitors departed. Charles William took his bottle, and when the ears relayed the second burp to Socks's brain, he came out from under the bed, and trailing dust from his whiskers, ran down the hall to the kitchen just in time to meet Mr. Bricker with the formula bottle. Sorry, Socks, said Mr. Bricker, unscrewing the cap. Cassie's right. You're too fat. Socks looked up and meowed to tell his master how hungry he was and how much he need of comfort after a terrible afternoon. Beat it, said Bricker's words were rude, but his voice was kindly. We can't have any fat cats around the house. We keep fit around here. Mrs. Bricker entered the kitchen to prepare supper. I'm going to watch my diet too, she said as her husband dumped Socks's share of the warm milk right down the drain. And I'm going to start exercising. I still can't zip all my slacks up. She raised her arms and bent down to touch her toes. Socks was outraged. What was the matter with these people? He was supposed to have formula right now. He was supposed to enjoy some beautiful, delicious, warm milk. He always had formula after Charles William. These people could not treat him this way. He placed his front paw on Mr. Bricker's leg and meowed to let his feelings be known. Sorry, Mr. Bricker had made up his mind to start Socks on a program of physical fitness. 1, 2, 1, 2. Mrs. Bricker continued to touch her toes. Socks unsheathed his claws the least bit and let them prick Mr. Bricker's leg. Ouch! You cut that out, said Mr. Bricker, unhooking the claw, and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Socks to sulk beside the refrigerator, while Mrs. Bricker, out of breath from her exercise, prepared the evening meal. All right, Socks, she finally said after she had tripped over him twice and stepped on his tail. I'll feed you now and get you out of the way. She laid 4 pieces of kidney instead of 8 on the dish in the laundry room. Socks gulped them down and looked up as if to say, where's the rest of my meal? 4 pieces of meat would not get him out of the way when he was used to 8. Silly cat, said Mrs. Bricker with affection. You and I are going to lose weight. Socks sat down beside the refrigerator and gave his whiskers a quick swipe with his paw while he thought the problem over. When Charles William fussed in the back bedroom and Mrs. Bricker hurried off to attend to him, Socks saw his chance. He sprang to the counter, where he was disappointed to discover that the Brickers were having wieners for supper. Too hungry to be choosy, he sank his teeth into a link and thumped it to the floor. Socks, cried Mrs. Bricker, you heard the thump and knew its meaning. Socks ran into a guilty crouch through the laundry and down the hall to his refuge under the bed. Mr. Bricker was after him with the broom. We can't let you get away with that, he said on his hands and knees as he lifted the Indian bedspread and poked at his cat. Come on out of there. Here's a picture of them. See him with the broom under the bed trying to get the cat out. Uh-oh, Socks. What have you done? Socks carried his prey to the farthest corner against the wall and, growling, faced Mr. Bricket. This was his wiener, and he was willing to fight for it. Mr. Bricker pushed the broom at him, but Socks did not budge. He growled more fiercely, and his fur rose along his spine. Let his owner yell and poke. He was hungry, and he was going to have that wiener. The broom jabbed him again. Socks dropped his wiener in the dust, and with every hair standing on end, hissed. Mr. Bricker laughed. Okay, you win this time, but next time, look out. He rose to his knees and left. Socks enjoyed his wiener and knew it was probably worth the fight. Socks settled down to gnaw the wiener as fiercely as if he had stalked and killed it. If his owner did not care enough about him to feed him properly, he would have to live by his wits. All right, tune in next time for another chapter of Socks.